Hi, Chiefs Kingdom. Gary McKenzie back here again with you for another episode of Gridiron Lines. This is a channel on the RGR Football YouTube network, and I believe RGR Football is the best Chiefs YouTube content on the internet. Not speaking about myself, just speaking about Ryan and Dan and Seth. I just play my little role here. And now that we got that little introduction over, today's content, today's video after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl is going to be all about Andy Reid, or mostly about Andy Reid. But before I start talking about Andy Reid, I want to take a quick detour, talk about some current events. As we all know, L'Jarius Sneed was given the franchise tag. The franchise tag value for a cornerback who is on their first time being franchise tagged is $19.8 million. So the Chiefs had about $30 million in cap space heading into this offseason. Now that they've tagged L'Jarius Sneed, their cap space is down to a little less than $10 million. And so with that franchise tag being almost $20 million, that's a huge hit into the Chiefs' cap space. So I think the Chiefs' plan going forward is going to be to try to sign L'Jarius Sneed to a long-term deal. If they cannot reach terms, then they may trade him. And I don't think any of us Chiefs fans want to see the Chiefs lose L'Jarius Sneed, but this is the nature of the NFL. They've got to pay Chris Jones. They've got to pay potentially L'Jarius Sneed. Coming down the pipeline, you've got guys like Nick Bolton, guys like Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, all of these quality players on the Chiefs team that are going to need to be paid too. So right now, for the Chiefs, some ways that they could make a little extra money or have a little extra money, one of them would be to do something that they already did, which is they cut Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's no longer on the books. That saved them a decent chunk of money. And then other things they could potentially do, looking at contracts on the Chiefs' current roster, Joe Thuney becomes an interesting situation. Not because I think the Chiefs should move on from him, but I think the Chiefs might consider giving him an extension and then reworking some of his contract. That'll save the Chiefs a decent chunk of money if they need to do it. And then for both L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones, for both of those players to be on the Chiefs roster in 2024, they're both going to need to be signed to longer-term deals where they're given a signing bonus that is spread out over the full term of the contract. My worry with Chris Jones is that if he is given a long-term contract, say for 4 years, $30 million a year, which is one of the estimates I saw out there, that contract is likely to be backloaded. And that means that after year 3 of that contract, the Chiefs might start feeling the pressure of that deal and have to cut ties with Chris Jones. And that's just the nature of the NFL. But I don't want to get too far into this. I just want to let you all know that the Chiefs did franchise tag L'Jarius Sneed. They're intending to work on a long-term deal with him. They're intending to work on a long-term deal with Chris Jones. And if they can't get one done with Sneed, then it's likely that they're going to need to trade him if they want to sign Chris Jones. So the math just isn't mathing right now for the Chiefs. And in order to sign Chris Jones, I feel something has to be done with L'Jarius Sneed at some point in time. I hope he signs a long-term deal with a signing bonus that is spread out over the length of the contract. Same with Chris Jones. That way they're in Kansas City in 2024. But that's current events, roster construction. Probably next week I'll do a deeper dive into my thoughts on how the Chiefs should go about building their roster for next season. As you all know, last year I was very happy with the way the Chiefs team was constructed. I told you over and over again that Patrick Mahomes with a top flight defense, a top tier defense, is my dream team. And we all saw why. I mean, the Chiefs offense did just enough to win the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs defense carried this team. And I think if you pair Patrick Mahomes with a top 3 defense, he's probably going to win the Super Bowl every year where that happens. He's just that good. And Andy Reid is just that good of an offensive mind. So, roster construction, I want the Chiefs to continue to put a lot of importance on the defensive side of the ball. But moving on from there, I want to talk about Andy Reid in this video and just kind of where he's at currently in his career as a head coach. So he's coached for 25 seasons, has a regular season record of 258 and 144 with 1 tie. That's a 641 winning percentage. With Philadelphia, he spent 14 seasons in Philadelphia, 130 wins, 93 losses, and 1 tie for a 583 win percentage. And then he's spent 11 seasons in Kansas City with the 128 wins, 51 losses, 0 ties, and a winning percentage of 715.715. That is a crazy, crazy win percentage. And one thing about Coach Reid is that he's getting older. You know, he's not as young as he was when he first started out in the NFL, obviously, as a head coach. And his first year, I believe he was 41 years old whenever he first started coaching with the Eagles, which at that time in the late 90s, there weren't a lot of really young head coaches, and 41 was pretty young at the time. So currently, as we speak, Andy Reid is the oldest coach in the NFL. And I've heard Andy Reid mention several times that he's kind of upset with Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll for retiring, and then Bill Belichick for not finding another job. He's a little upset with them in a joking sort of way because now he is the oldest coach. It had been Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll that were the oldest coaches at 71 and 72 years respectively. So now that Andy Reid's the oldest coach, he has to deal with all these retirement questions. And I don't think Andy Reid is anywhere near retirement. I don't think it's in the plans for him at this point in time. And even Clark Hunt went to say, you know, and I quote, "As I see Andy, he remains incredibly energized and excited. I think he has as much energy and passion as I've seen in the 10 plus years he's been with us." That was Clark Hunt saying that after this offseason. He thinks Coach Reid has just as much passion and energy, or more so, than he's seen the entire time he's been in Kansas City. And if you think about Coach Reid, this man eats, sleeps, dreams football and cheeseburgers. That's what he loves. He loves football and cheeseburgers. And I don't see a coach or a man who loves doing what they want to do, and they finally, after years of work, decades of work, get the dream situation and then walk away from it. That makes no sense to me. So I don't think Andy Reid is going to retire anytime soon. In fact, I could see him coaching to be one of the older head coaches ever in the NFL. And really, the great head coaches are usually the ones that coach to when they're the oldest. And logically, this makes sense. This makes sense because you're an old head coach because you're good. So it's kind of one of my coworkers used to explain oldies music. And the thought was, is it good because it's old? Or is it old because it's good? And so the fact that music was still being played, that oldies music was still being played, meant that it was good. That's why it stood the test of time. Same thing with these head coaches that have been around the NFL whenever they were very old. they're old and they're coaching when they're old because they're good. So I think Andy Reid definitely falls in that category. And all-time head coaches, did you know the oldest head coach in the history of the NFL was Romeo Crennel? He was thrown in as an interim head coach in 2022. He was 73 years old and 199 days. 73 years old. 73 and a half years old. And the last game he coached was on January 9th, 2022. So Romeo Crennel was the oldest head coach to ever lead a team in an NFL game at 73 years old. The second oldest coach was George Halas, an all-time great Chicago Bears head coach. He was 72 years old and 318 days. He hung things up. He retired in 1967. Marv Levy, he was 72 years old, 139 days. 72 years, 139 days old. Whenever he coached his last game, and that was in 1997. Then you have two more recent head coaches. Number 4, Pete Carroll, fourth oldest head coach of all time to coach a football game, an NFL football game. 72 years, 114 days old. He retired in 2023. And then you have Bill Belichick, 71 years, 266 days old. And he may have coached his last game in 2023. We'll see how that pans out. But those are the 5 oldest head coaches of all time. And other than Romeo Crennel, each one of those coaches was great. And they were old because they were great at what they did, so they were allowed to hang around. I think Andy Reid is going to be allowed to hang around in the NFL because he's that good. Now, Romeo Crennel, you wouldn't say he's a great head coach, but I think it's fair to say he was a phenomenal defensive coordinator all throughout his time in the NFL. So he was thrown in as an interim head coach, so he sort of counts, sort of doesn't count. But the other 4 definitely some of the best head coaches to ever grace a sideline in the NFL. So Andy Reid is 66. And we just went through all these other head coaches that coached until they were in their early 70s. I don't think there's any reason why Andy Reid couldn't coach for another 5 years. The only thing I could see stopping him from coaching another 5 years, 6 years, is if he decided that he wanted to spend time with his wife and his grandkids. And Andy Reid, many times, whenever he's been asked about retirement, he brings up his wife. And I think he does that out of love and admiration for his significant other. I think he's basically saying this to show, hey, I appreciate the sacrifices that my family makes, my wife in particular, for me to do what I love. And I want her to know that. So I think that's why he always brings up his wife, Nancy, in those conversations. But looking at the winningest head coaches of all time in the NFL, including regular season and postseason, here are the top 5 winningest head coaches. At number 1, you have Don Shula with 347 wins. Number 2, you have Bill Belichick with 333 wins. Number 3, you have George Halas at 324 wins. Number 4, you have Andy Reid at 284. And then number 5, you have Tom Landry at 270. So I want to start thinking about Coach Reid's legacy and where he can go with this. So with Mahomes, Coach Reid with Patrick Mahomes, he won 13 games, regular season and postseason in 2018, 15 in 2019, 16 in 2020, 14 in 2021, 17 in 2022, and 15 in 2023. So on average, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, regular season and postseason, have won 15 games per year. So just playing the numbers game, if Coach Reid were to coach to the age of 68 and he got those 15 wins per year, he would pass George Halas for number 3 all time in wins. If he coached to the age of 69, he would pass Bill Belichick to be number 2 all time in NFL wins. If he coached to the age of 70, he would become the winningest head coach in NFL history. He would be number 1. And to get there, to get to number 3, he needs 40 more wins. To get to number 2, he needs 49 more wins. To get to number 1, he needs 63 more wins. So it's not going to be a next season thing. It's not going to be a season after that kind of thing. But Andy Reid is getting up there to be perhaps the greatest head coach ever. And it's totally realistic to think that he could coach to be when he's 70 years old. He could coach when he's 71. He could coach when he's 72. You know, George Halas, Marv Levy, Romeo Crennel, Pete Carroll, they all did it. They all coached when they were 72. He just has to continue to love the game and love what he's doing. And right now, he's got everything he's ever wanted. He's got a great quarterback. He's got a great front office, a great general manager, good ownership that he gets along well with. And we won't really talk about the Chiefs' NFLPA team report in this video, but he's got everything he's ever wanted. Great coordinators. And for a man who loves football as much as Andy Reid does, you can't see him walking away from this anytime soon. Anytime soon at all. And so, looking at Super Bowls, Bill Belichick has 6, Chuck Noll has 4, and then Bill Walsh, Joe Gibbs, and Andy Reid each have 3. Which I feel that whenever we're talking about great head coaches, all-time great head coaches, we don't talk about Joe Gibbs as much as we should. Because he did a lot of great things for the Washington football team, whatever you want to call them. But I think it's totally within the realm of possibility that Andy Reid becomes the winningest head coach in NFL history. Totally within the realm of possibility. And then in addition to that, I want to talk about this Chiefs group as a whole. The future of the Chiefs. And I just want you to think about this. Andy Reid has a good chance of becoming the winningest head coach of all time, cementing himself as most likely, arguably, the greatest head coach to ever coach in the NFL. The greatest head coach ever. Simultaneously, you have on this Chiefs roster a quarterback who, from the eye test, from the numbers test, is the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. He's had the greatest start to a career that we've ever seen of any quarterback. So you're pairing not only the greatest quarterback who's ever played in the NFL with the greatest head coach who's ever done it in the NFL. And Andy Reid did it without Patrick Mahomes. He did it with Alex Smith. He did it with Donovan McNabb. He even did it with Kevin Kolb for a little bit. He did it with Michael Vick. He won games with all these different quarterbacks. But you're pairing the greatest head coach with the greatest quarterback that plays in the most important position in an era of football where the quarterback is of the utmost importance. And I think given that setup, I think the Chiefs are going to dominate the NFL landscape unlike anything we've ever seen over this next 5 years. And that's including the past 6 years. So maybe over a 10-year span, 11-year span, 12-year span. I think over this span of time, the Chiefs are going to dominate the NFL landscape like nothing the NFL has ever seen, and maybe like nothing the NFL will ever see again, at least not in my lifetime. And it's all because these two positions, or this head coach and quarterback pairing, they're both the greatest of all time. And I feel almost sorry for every other team in the NFL because this has never happened before, other than when Bill Belichick and Tom Brady did it. And I think that Andy Reid's a better coach than Bill Belichick. And I think Patrick Mahomes is a better quarterback than Tom Brady. Just from the eye test, from the numbers test. So, oh boy, everyone better look out. They've got 3 Super Bowls, and I think there is more to come. And seeing what you've seen from this Chiefs team, you'd be a fool not to think so. But I want to know what you think about this head coach and quarterback pairing. Tell me in the comments if you think I am being hyperbolic, if there's a little too much in what I'm saying, or if you agree, let me know too. But as always, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to watch this video, and thank you for always, liking, commenting. Thank you for all of you who have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a good time to join. We're getting ready to hit off-season content, and Ryan and Dan always do such a good job breaking down the draft, trying to find new prospects for the Chiefs. The Chiefs got my draft crush last year, which was Rashee Rice. I don't get draft crushes very often, but every once in a while I'll talk about them. So stick around and join if you haven't joined already. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and hit the like button down there if you want to. But this is all I got for today's video. This is Gary signing out. Y'all have a good rest of your week.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.